why is it so hard to change your belief systems, even if you know they aren't right for you?
They're hardwired. These belief systems are, in my understanding, are programmed when our brains are developing as children. And they have to do with culture. They have to do with how you get along with people and how you're protected. If you develop, and you really can't, different aberrant belief systems from your parents or guardians when you're 4 or 5 years old, that you're not going to survive. You just can't do it. So we don't do that. It's a protective mechanism, and you can throw in the woo-woo belief that you get the parents that you're supposed to, you get the child you're supposed to. I don't really buy that totally, but that good can come from that. I think many times there are people who are just born in parts of the world and it's just a bad luck. That can happen also. So they're being programmed too. But it's all a programming thing. We are neurological beings. The things that come through our brain affect our five physical senses, and the externals affect that. It's an afferent and an efferent communication. But this is why it's so difficult. So when we start rebelling, say at teenage, you get all the hormones kicked in. About age 9, it seems to kick in. 9, and by the time you're a teenager, you'll be glad you remember them as babies, so you don't kill them. But
So true.
I think as a parent, which you are, and I want to address some things with you today, because I'm not a parent. I haven't had that experience. But I think parents, from what I have observed, are extremely concerned with, am I teaching this child the right thing? Do you feel has that been your experience with your 3 sons?
Yes, because it's hard to know what the right thing is, especially if you've changed a lot from the way you were brought up. Like I was brought up in the 80s when hitting your kids was normal. There was the strap in school. So domestic violence was normal and accepted. That's how you kept your kids quiet and in line. So going from that, knowing in my soul that that's not the correct way to have a loving family, but changing it is a lot difficult because I was programmed from a very young age.
So, what caused you to change? Say, what's an example of one thing?
Well, having babies changed everything because I was naturally an attachment parent. I knew that my kids needed to be near me. So a lot of people train their babies to go to sleep using the cry it out method. They leave their baby to cry themselves to sleep. And I didn't do that because it didn't feel right. I knew that my baby was expressing the need to be with the need for something, even though you couldn't hear them. And so in the Western world, we have cribs and we have nurseries and we have separate rooms for babies. And that's the normal. That's what we're raised. When I babysat other people's kids, that's baby went in crib, baby went down with a schedule. But when I had my own children, I realized babies are naturally supposed to be with their mothers. And sleeping with your child is so normal and actually really healthy. But I didn't know how to do that or even knew that it was a possible thing for me.
I have found that pattern in some of my friends who are Hispanic, that their kids slept in their bed or next to them or on top of the covers until they were almost teens. Some of them did. And that was a normal thing for them. And I think that sort of Cancerian knowledge and intuition you had is very wise. You weren't trying, from my opinion, to raise them too fast. It appears you allowed that process. So, what if somebody is about to have a baby and they're trying to decide what to do with that? What would you suggest? How do they resolve that when everyone around them saying, no, you need a crib and a nursery? What do you suggest from your
You can
experience?
you can have those things and you can listen to people's advice because people are usually good-hearted. With if a baby sleeps through the night in their own crib, it makes it easier for everybody. People don't have ill intentions, but you have to listen to yourself and feel that connection with your child. You have to be able to change your mind on things that you didn't think of before and be open to new ways of doing things if you want to be a better parent and to be your child to have the best life, because you're not being a parent is never going to be what you expected, and you're always going to have to shift things. Your children are never carbon copies of you, and they're always going to challenge you in new ways.
That's a good point. It must be scary because what I've noticed with parents, while the kid's in the womb, you think they're going to come out and be just like you. They'll be easy. Then all of a sudden, they burst into this unusual being, and you're like, where did that come from? Well, they're different souls. Did you choose to carry your kids around during the day in that little sack, like on your belly or your back?
Yes. And also going out, I tended to carry them more than have a stroller. And those baby carrier car seats, I have a personal issue with them. Babies are carried around in just a car seat, and they're never really with people. They're just in a car seat separate. I had my babies with me as much as possible. Babies need to be with people, and they need to be secure with the ones they love. And that helps them become secure humans in the world. Because once they become 3, younger than that, they start to walk and they want to go do their own thing. They're going to go off on their own. You don't have to help them do that, but you have to help them know that they have a secure place to learn about the world.
Beautifully put. What is the age difference among your 3 sons?
They're like a year and a half between all of them. So I had 3 boys in 3.5 years.
How did you manage that? What you had one and carrying, how did you manage that?
Goodness. It was a beautiful chaos. I don't know. Part of it is like just messing up and learning and growing. I have a wonderful husband who's a great dad, and he was always very involved. So that helped me. When it was just me and my 3, like I talk about them now because they're all teenagers and they're bigger than me, but I talk about how there's a time I could carry all 3 of them at a time.
Oh,
I'd carry all 3 of them into the house. It was great. And when the youngest was born, the middle one needed to be carried around in that reassurance more than the youngest did, because we added a new one to the family. So it's just a lot of, as soon as you figure it out, your kids will change and you won't know what you're doing anymore. So you have to lead with love. So ignore everything else I've just said and just lead with love. You love your kids and you're going to figure it out.
Who were your teachers?
I have a lot of mothers in my family, but I did things differently than them. Like my grandmother's an amazing woman, but she's a school teacher who went to university in England during World War II, and she was appalled that we were going to homeschool. But she's still a mentor in a way. She's somebody I look up to. My own mom was a great mom, but she worked and she didn't parent the way I parent either. I didn't know anybody that parented the way I parented, but I was thankful for the internet because I could look up the things that I was feeling and wanting to do and see that there was a name for it and there was a community of other people doing that too, if that makes sense.
Well, it makes a little sense to me. I wasn't a mother. I wasn't cut out for it. Spirit told me at a very early age, don't even think about it. I never played with dolls. It just wasn't my thing. So I'm fascinated with this and the young people that Tom and I have in our life. I mean, he's 66. I'm about to be 72. So young people to us are like in their 40s is the other generation. And the differences that they see in parenting from people who are just starting out, maybe in their late 20s or 30s, is profound. Who would think today about beating the poop out of your kid with a hairbrush because they did something wrong? I mean, I'm sure there are people that do that, but you have 3 generations, mine, yours, and younger, to where that used to be a norm. And I know you spoke of that. You addressed that too. So how do you discipline kid? What'd you do? Talk? I mean,
we go stand in the corner is something that worked really well for us because it takes everybody a minute. Everybody needs a minute. Because you know what? There's times where as a parent, you're not able to respond and you need a minute to calm down. Now you're going to have people argue and you're going to have siblings get aggressive. But if you have a house rule where we don't hit and we don't get physical, we take a step back until we calmly talk about the situation. Then you have a designated spot for the kids to be able to do that.
So, did you have a designated timeout corner?
It changed depending on the ages. Like if I'm in the kitchen working, there's there's stairs nearby. So sit on the stairs. It's a great place to be able to. At certain ages, kids need to be observed or assisted to remind themselves. They're not going to. If a young child might want to harm themselves, you have to keep an eye on them. You could have a chair. Some people have a stool. Some people have a corner. Some people send their kids to their room. It really depends on your family what's going to work. For us, we had a corner that worked because it was a corner where they could sit or stand. They could get control of their emotions while whoever else was involved could get control of their emotions, and the adult could figure out what the next steps needed to be.
Well, that's brilliant because what you did, I think, is a neurological reset where you have these neurons firing that is upset, got to win, got to be right, got to compete, just the normal stuff that we do when we're upset. And when you go sit down, it backs out of that. You get a little more maybe endorphins coming in. But what have your boys shared with you about when they were in timeout? What they did or thought?
I don't know that we've had too many specific conversations about it, but I do notice how they can now use the same words they'll say when they find themselves aggressive. They'll take themselves out of the situation and say, "I need a minute." So we've talked about how they're able to become aware of what emotions are making them triggered so that they don't do something destructive to themselves or others or the house.
That's really PhD level parenting there. That's pretty
Does it work all
cool.
the time? Of course not. Do we still have, brothers shoving each other and, parents once in a while raising their voices? Of course. No one's ever going to be perfect 100% of the time. It's just striving for that. We have to remember we love each other and we sometimes can't communicate. My oldest, kids are so brilliant when they're young. When my oldest was probably 5 years old, there was some type of argument. He said, "You know what, Mom? We're five people from very different places. And so sometimes we're going to have a hard time living together."
Wow. At 5.
Yeah.
Good Lord. That's amazing. Well, you just shared with me before we got on air that up in Saskatchewan, where you guys are, it's winter and when we're taping this. And you said it's been 30 degrees below for quite a while. And you shared that everybody's getting a little antsy. How have you noticed that your parenting has helped your kids deal with being cabin fevered?
They are aware of their emotions, so they can separate themselves. They can communicate with words what's going on, um, and they can come up with other things to do.
Do you think controlling the emotions, teaching kids how to do that, is a step forward? And how would you suggest people do that?
I think just allowing kids to have emotions. Now, this is difficult because my kids don't attend school and school does things very differently. So I can't speak to that. But allowing kids to have emotions, there's nothing wrong with any emotion a child's having. We're not trying to control their emotions or force them to do something. It's more of an awareness. And it's like a lifelong thing. Now, I always say that being in nature helps you understand your emotions because it helps balance them. It helps you get rid of them. So then you notice, hey, maybe when I'm hungry, I get angry, or maybe when I haven't got enough physical exercise, I'm irritable. And so you can make those connections.
There is so much to that. It's always a panacea, I believe. And you raised your kids in the woods. I grew up kind of in the woods, South Appalachia, northern Birmingham area. And you have spoken many times about your connection to nature there. When your kids are in public, do they seem to say things about what other people their age are doing or saying?
they don't always relate to people their age unless they're people, other homeschool kids or people who have not been raised in institutions, which is what schools are. They're much more relaxed in their environment, I would say, and they don't understand school or how other kids are because it seems so controlled. It doesn't seem like kids are allowed to be who they are. I realized recently that when I went to high school, I went to public school. Came from a very normal, if you will, family. But what I realized when I went to high school, we never went out in nature ever again.
Right. Well, we didn't either.
And now so
yeah,
much illness with teens and kids. And I really think there's a correlation to how they're not in nature anymore. And now they all have mental illnesses that they're struggling with.
it's a huge point. And of course, we will resolve that eventually. And I think it has to come from those who are already doing it to model that behavior. Certainly, the school system is broken. And as we spoke of last week, I think so much is broken right now, but that happens. It's a precursor to fixing things. We're obligated to search for answers and responses. What would you suggest that parents can do to bring some of that forward into their own life or their own society?
I think a lot of it is being open to doing things differently or seeing different outcomes. Um, don't just think everything's broken. See where things are still wonderfully beautiful. Nature's a great place to start. Family is a place to start. What's going right with your family? Where are you connecting with your kids? If you don't have kids, where are you connecting with your community? I think it's really local. A lot of the big, horrible crises and everything falling apart is much bigger than us. But you always say, look out your window and see what's going good.
Yeah, look out your window and look inside your home. From listening to you talk, I'm learning more about collaboration. And that those of you who are homeschooling, I've seen some amazing homeschool networks. I remember years ago, Tom and I went down to, where are we? Heading down towards Wisdom, toward Jackson Hole. And we stopped at a ski resort up high because he had to meet with some people. And there's a woman sitting at a table in the lodge, and it was apparently part of a homeschool group. And I'd never seen that. She was arranging lessons and talking to people. I thought, this is a whole other world. I would have blossomed in this world. I would have had a wonderful education, but I didn't get that. And I never forgot seeing that. And so perhaps the collaborative effort of what you're doing, that you guys communicate with other moms online, other groups, but there is a point of taking action that really requires courage, and it requires balking the system some. And I can imagine with you homeschooling as you did, these other parents, if they didn't have parents who did that, or they have family members who say, well, they'll never learn or they'll be antisocial, that it took a lot of courage to do this.
Yeah, it really does, because I was not somebody who was familiar with homeschooling at all. At all. I didn't know it existed. And I don't even like the term homeschooling. It's just the most used and understood. You're right. There's so many groups and people and families in changing the way they see learning. And I'm a researcher. I like to know about things. So when I learned about education and studied it, I realized that the only real learning that happens is self-directed learning. You only learn something when you want to learn it. Any other memorization or doing well on a test happens because you're required to. And so if anybody is interested in how kids learn and what's best for their kids, I would recommend the book Changing Our Minds by Naomi Fisher, because she goes into all the research that's been done since the 70s and earlier about how kids learn best and how self-directed education is actually easy and possible. She talks about stories of people who've whose children have succeeded and been led satisfying and successful lives by finding their own way through education.
Oh, that's wonderful. Does she also have maybe a YouTube site or address?
She is online. I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure she's on she does interviews on YouTube, and I know she's on either Facebook or LinkedIn. I just read the book is the easiest go to for me because it contains everything. She does talk a lot about self-directed education. So
That's very helpful. Very, very helpful. Thank you for that. So, from what I hear you say, if somebody, what about, most moms these days, they have to work. This is what I addressed very clumsily, but I addressed it last week and finally ending with there's something wrong. I don't know how to fix it. With women forced into the workplace when they have young children, who takes care of the children? It's a sign of the times. Are they wrong? No, they're trying to survive, but something's wacky. What would you suggest for these moms who are working one or two jobs, even single mothers who really want to self educate their children and can't?
single moms have my heart because parenting is hard, and I don't know what I would have done it without a partner. I would say, I hope if you're a single mom, you have a grandmother, an aunt, somebody, even just a friend who's an aunt to your kids, somebody who loves you and wants to support your kids and helps you with your parenting, because you need two parents. You need more than one adult to get through it. But for home education, believe it's possible, because you don't have to school doesn't have to happen between the hours that school happens. So even if you work, you can still home educate your kids. Depending on it can work around what your family's schedule is easy. And I am such a firm believer in women working for themselves. When I was a stay-at-home mom and my husband worked. And then when I became the working parent, I wanted to work from home because I wanted to see my kids grow up. And even with dad at home, I still wanted to be around and have the flexibility to have my work around my family's needs. Most companies don't care about families. They just care about you doing what they want and they'll pay you. So when you work for yourself, you can find collaborations with people like you, Zoli, who appreciate and respect family and know that I can do my work around my family. They know that the two are compatible.
I prefer that energy field. And it could be that talk about neurological programming. I grew up in a very secure environment. I went to school, but mom was there when I left. And at 3, when I got home, I'd sit and I'd have an apple and we'd talk. She was always there. And that was the 50s in Alabama. That was Leave It to Beaver. That was, June Cleaver era. Where women, and she said, and my cousin who I talked to yesterday, who's in her 90s, she says, we all sacrificed our wanting to go out and do other things at that time because there were no other options for us, really. So things have changed tremendously. I wish there were more maybe 501c3 organizations or organizations that could help women find work at home or who allowed more of that. Certainly during COVID, there was a lot of that. Then it went back in a lot of companies to you have to come into work. I think we will find a hybrid situation with that. And we are in the time of the divine feminine. Women are gaining power. There are a lot of screaming, yelling, idiot women out there too. But the strong go with the weak. And we do help each other. We can grow and change. But I also have a big place in my heart for single mothers, especially these women living in the inner city that are just trying to get by. It breaks my heart. But it can be like that all over the world.
Yeah.
So I think from what you say, we're dealing with the time of how do we collaborate differently? And what are the threats? I mean, we have to have money to live. It's not the root of evil. You have to have it. So, how would you suggest moms go about that? What is your idea on that? I have none.
Well, I'm going to take the pressure off the mums and put the pressure on the world and say we need a world and a society where children are allowed to exist. We don't need them to be put off in school or in daycare. Kids are allowed to be with mom or dad at work. Even I remember this, I'm from Canada, but Elon was working with the president and he had his kids with him sometimes. And I saw criticism of that. I said, no, we need to see more of that. We need to see kids at work. We need kids in the community, kids at work where they can. Obviously, I'm not saying kids in the surgery. Let's not be ridiculous. But kids can be compatible with work in a lot more ways than we're allowing them to. Some people will say, I'm not going to let you work from home if your kids are at home. Well, why not? You're more than capable of being able to do the two things, and bring your kids to work. I want to see politicians take their kids to work, obviously, when possible. And that would allow people to realize that kids are not in the way. Kids are not something to be pushed off to the side. They're actually our future. And they'll learn a lot when they're allowed to be in the world doing stuff with adults.
Oh, that's absolutely wonderful. And it brings to mind the image of I'm a real fan of the royal family in Britain. All my genes are from there anyway, so I guess it's genetic. But look at what William and Kate are doing with their children. They moved to a new forever home and they did it for their children. They want them, and I don't think they have much help there. I think their nanny is gone. They raised their children, and this is royalty. This is royalty. They're setting a beautiful model in Britain for that. But I love that idea. And I think it's something that will happen the more people do it. Now, if you bring your kids to a work situation or whatever, they better behave themselves and be appropriate in a certain way. I was the kind of kid that wouldn't. I would have been a terror in that situation, but that was just me. I was a very, very weird kid. My brother would have done very, very well. And so I think it depends also on the child and the situation. But how can we encourage this, Linda? Do we just start with people saying, damn it, I'm bringing my kid, suck it up, deal with it?
We do. And we also start with an expectation that children, and it all goes back to what you talk about a lot. We're all one human. We're all one humanity. We're all one soul. We're here together. So why are we just, yes, children can be loud and disruptive sometimes. And there will be places where they have to behave in a certain way or they wouldn't be able to stay. My kids were always told, my kids are amazing at restaurants when they were little because they were told, they knew if they weren't, they would leave. And that's just how I was because my kids aren't going to disrupt other people's enjoyment of their time. Now, of course, if a kid gets hurt or there's exceptions to that, but it's a balance and kids need to learn that from a very young age.
Yes, they do. And this behavioral reward system is very important. The neurological reward system that we have, for example, if you help somebody, you get an attaboy, an attagirl, you feel good. You get this joining together with others with expecting nothing back. And that is what we're talking about. You've addressed that in many ways of teaching your children to live at home in a certain way and to not take their private behavior out in public. Those are two totally different situations. They are behavioral situations. But the way that you learn, I think, is the way that you'll teach. And perhaps many people who are having difficulty with this, they were never taught as kids. They just got the crap beat out of them or nobody talked to them or, a great model, I think, used to be Ben Carson. I think he had a home something with Obama. And Ben Carson's mom, she was a single mom. And she worked and she sent him to the library. She demanded he read. Now, he's also brilliant. But what a wonderful model. But also, you're dealing with the kids your kids are dealing with. Role modeling from other families. Well, they can do this. Why can't I? Look at the drug and alcohol issues. most legal drug on the planet is booze. I comically say, somebody says, "Oh, she's graduating. What can I give her?" Well, a bottle of champagne. And my statement to him was, "I don't buy or give drugs to people." And he said back, "No, no, it's just champagne." I said, "That's a legal drug. It's regulated. There are times and places you can do it, and there's an age when you can do it, and it causes more wrecks than about anything. It's a drug." So, what happens when your kids are more involved with their free time with people like that? How do you suggest people even address that?
Oh man, that's one of the most difficult things, especially now that the internet. Kids are in, involved with anything you can imagine and everything that you can imagine and wouldn't want to. Uh, so I am quite a strict person when it comes to being in my kids' lives because I believe it's my business to know who they're involved with and what they're talking about. I don't think kids need to not have be on electronics where it's the age of technology. You're going to have it, but you have to just know what your kids are doing. Another book recommendation, and he's online for sure. Dr. Gabor Mate. I might have
Gabor Mate, yeah.
Yeah. He has a book called Hold On to Your Kids, and he talks about how you have to be important in your kids' lives. And as they grow and they have peers, you still have to be important in their lives. You have to hold on to them and not let them be influenced too much by outside influences.
I totally agree with that. And he's one of my favorites. Gabor Mate is a psychologist or psychiatrist that uses himself as a model. And I learned to do that from listening to him and reading his material. His addiction is buying records. And he's totally open about it. He says, "I drive my wife crazy. I'll go down and spend too much money on an old 33 record." And he's very well aware that this is just part of human nature. So he's brilliant and he is Canadian. And his ideas and views on parenting and addiction are the future. They are excellent. If you guys want to look him up, it's Gabor, Gabor Mate, Mate. And he is Jewish, and I think one of his parents was Auschwitz. I forget that connection. But once again, the Jewish people, the most brilliant, brilliant, brilliant parcels of humanity.
Yeah, he has incredible insight. Highly recommended.